Get this rusty junk off my road. It's ruining the aesthetic of the neighborhood." She uttered these words without a shadow of a doubt, holding heavy hydraulic bolt cutters with which she had just snapped the hardened steel shackle of my lock. Mud splashes from the wheels of passing cars splattered right onto her beige Chanel suit, but she didn't even flinch. Standing at the gate of my farm, she looked as though our entire county had been bought out by her at a private auction, lock, stock, and barrel. I slowly walked down from the porch. I was wearing old work boots and faded jeans. "Ma'am, this is private property. You have committed breaking and entering." She didn't even deign to look at me. She simply kicked the severed lock into the dry dust of the roadside. "Unscheduled inspection by the Homeowners Association Board. Your livestock, this squalid barn, and the manure pile behind it are being photographed right now. You will receive a fine by the end of the day. My property is not under the jurisdiction of your HOA." She gave a short, dry chuckle, the kind usually reserved for an disobedient puppy trying to bark at a passing train. "Honey, I define the boundaries of my board myself." She didn't bother to check my documents. She didn't ask for my last name. And, of course, she failed to notice the special agent badge from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division resting on the kitchen table just 4 meters away from her. That was her first and biggest mistake. But what followed was a far more serious crime. 9 months before the shackle of my lock fell into the mud with a dull thud, I was sitting in the gloomy office of a divorce attorney in Fairfax County. On that day, 14 years of marriage finally turned into a neat stack of stamped paper. My ex-wife, Elizabeth, got the large 2-story colonial revival house in McLean, complete with manicured hydrangea bushes, a picture-perfect lawn, and a 3-car garage. I was left with a bank account and an absolute deafening emptiness that I hadn't yet learned how to fill. 14 years of service in the Bureau had trained me to see right through people. I knew how to read audit reports, track down shell companies in offshore zones, and catch red-handed those who thought they were smarter than the law. But those skills proved utterly useless when it came to saving a family while working 70 hours a week and missing every single one of my son's soccer games. Elizabeth wasn't a villain. She was simply tired of waiting. I was always late. That was the whole story. The farm found me on a random Thursday in April. A colleague at the Bureau casually mentioned the bankruptcy of a small farmstead in the western part of Loudoun County. 47 acres of rolling pastures, an old oak timber barn built back in the 1940s, and a sturdy cedar fence around the perimeter. A stream ran through the southeastern part of the property, clear with a rocky bottom, winding through the meadows like a silver thread. I drove there right after work, dressed in my formal business suit and tie. The moment I stepped out of the car, it hit me. The smell of sun-warmed grass, damp red clay, and wild mint. That very clean, real air I hadn't inhaled since childhood, back when I used to visit my grandfather's farm in Lancaster County. The wind rustled through the canopies of old oaks, as if the entire valley were taking one deep, peaceful breath. I signed the purchase documents that very weekend. A month later, I already had 6 Black Angus heifers, a repaired watering trough, and massive barn doors that finally stopped creaking with every gust of wind. My 9-year-old son, Austin, a lanky boy with a gap-toothed smile and perpetually messy hair, came to visit me every weekend. He helped me coat the wooden fence rails with protective sealant and named every single cow after dinosaurs from an encyclopedia. His favorite was a stubborn heifer he proudly christened Triceratops. For the first time in many years, I felt I could breathe deeply. The tension that had accumulated in my shoulders for years began to melt away. The farm gave me something city life never could, a sense of solid ground beneath my feet. My property bordered the western edge of a gated subdivision called Ridgecrest Meadows. It was a typical upscale development of 200 carbon-copy two-story houses erected 6 years ago on what used to be floodplain meadows. Massive McMansions with synthetic facades, 3-car garages, and monthly HOA fees that could feed an average family for a week. However, my land possessed a history that made these new developments look like infants. My title deed carried a clear designation: Agricultural Zoning A3. No restrictions, no easements in favor of developers, no HOA membership, and not the slightest relation to Ridgecrest Meadows. But to Brenda Hargrove, these legal nuances mattered absolute zilch. She showed up during my second week on the farm. A dazzling white Mercedes G-Wagon glided up to my gate with the smoothness of an ocean liner docking at a humble wooden pier. A woman stepped gracefully out of the cabin, looking as if she had just been assembled piece by piece on a mannequin at Neiman Marcus. A platinum blonde with a flawless bronze tan that clearly hadn't been acquired under a real sun. She wore a cream-colored Chanel dress, the price of which surely exceeded my monthly car payment. The heels of her Louis Vuitton shoes tapped sharply and aggressively against my gravel, like a warning alarm. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she said, extending a hand with an impeccable manicure. "I'm Brenda Hargrove, president of the Ridgecrest Meadows Homeowners Association. We have certain standards regarding the aesthetics of the area, and I decided to stop by personally to give you our rules." She handed me a thick folder containing 40 pages of fine print. Inside were regulations regarding grass height, approved paint shades for outbuildings, rules for keeping animals, and standards for the visual harmony of the community. I skimmed through the pages. Her suffocatingly sweet perfume fought a desperate battle against the natural smell of hay and manure wafting from the pen. "Ma'am, thank you for the visit," I replied, handing the folder back. "However, my property has nothing to do with your board." She tilted her head slightly, as if I had just informed her that the earth was cube-shaped. Then a short, patronizing laugh escaped her chest. "Oh, honey," she chirped, "all land within a 2-mile radius of Ridgecrest is part of our ecosystem. You'll understand soon enough." She turned and stepped back toward her car, leaving deep heel indentations in my gravel, as if every stone on that road already belonged to her personally. 2 weeks later, I received my first official notice of violation, demanding a $500 fine. The list of infractions was impressive: unauthorized keeping of livestock, unapproved fence paint color, and the presence of visible agricultural machinery on the property. Payment due date: 15 days. I pulled the land documents out of the safe. In black and white, they stated, "Zoning A3, agricultural classification, no HOA restrictions." A call to the county recorder's office confirmed in exactly 90 seconds my parcel had never been, was not, and legally could not be included in Ridgecrest Meadows. I drafted an extremely polite, dry letter addressed to Brenda, attaching an excerpt from the land registry, and sent it by certified mail. 3 days later, a second notice arrived, bearing a postmark. The fine had doubled, with an added penalty for failure to cooperate. The message was crystal clear. She didn't care about laws, she cared about compliance. And that was only the beginning. Complaints about my property began raining down on county services like an artillery barrage, exactly one per day, methodical and widespread. This ensured that each report went to a different department. The first complaint cited noise pollution. The lowing of my 6 cows at dawn allegedly disturbed the peace of residents. The second complaint was sent to Environmental Protection, claims that manure runoff was contaminating the groundwater. The third went to Zoning Enforcement, claiming I was operating an illegal commercial business in a residential zone. The fourth went to the Health Department, claiming flies from my farm were swarming the community pool. The fifth complaint declared a drop in property value for neighboring lots, backed by a crude Excel spreadsheet cobbled together in 10 minutes. On Tuesday morning, a county inspector arrived at the farm. His only saving graces were worn jeans and an ever-present clipboard. The man's name was Chuck Waverly. He was around 55, holding his clipboard in one hand and a crumpled cup of cheap gas station coffee in the other. He had the tired look of an honest civil servant buried under a mountain of petty complaints. He walked around my property for about 40 minutes. Chuck checked the drainage ditches, took soil samples near the stream, counted the cows, inspected the fence, and carefully examined my agricultural permit posted prominently inside the barn. Then he closed his clipboard, took a large gulp of his now cold coffee, and sighed heavily. "Garrett, your place is in immaculate shape. Zoning is fully compliant, permits are active, and waste disposal meets state code. I don't have a single hook to hang a violation on, even if I wanted to." I nodded silently. "Chuck, tell me honestly, how often does the same person file complaints like this against farms in this area?" The inspector looked at me with an expression of deep sympathy. "Let's put it this way, Townsend. You're not the first farmer I've been sent to over the past year. The handwriting and the complainant are always the same." He got into his pickup truck and drove off. I was left standing at the entrance, watching the dust settle on the road and wondering just how deep this rabbit hole went. That same week, Brenda moved to open hostility. She rented the Ridgecrest Meadows clubhouse to hold an emergency meeting on neighborhood improvement. Invitations went to every resident within a mile, except me. However, Earl Payton, my neighbor to the east, a 71-year-old dairy farmer who had been working his land since the days of President Nixon, filled me in on everything that happened. Brenda had prepared an entire slideshow. The screen displayed photos of my farm, taken from the most unflattering angles. A mud puddle by the pen after a heavy rain, an old rusty trough I hadn't gotten around to replacing yet, and my pickup truck with clumps of clay on the tires. The headline on the first slide read, "An eyesore in the community, why our property values are dropping." She stood before an audience of 80 people in a Versace dress, laser pointer in hand, passionately explaining that my livestock posed an epidemic threat. The barn was a fire hazard, and the wooden fence destroyed the stylistic unity of the neighborhood. The phrase, "community standards," crossed her lips exactly 14 times. Earl had meticulously counted. Some neighbors applauded, others stayed silent out of embarrassment, but no one asked the main question. Why should a farm that had existed for half a century submit to the rules of a new subdivision? "Son," Earl told me later that evening, standing on my porch and nervously adjusting his worn cap. "She pulled the exact same trick on the Buckley family 3 years ago. Wade Buckley had 100 acres south of here. He grew hay, kept cows, and paid his taxes honestly for 40 years. First came the complaints, then the fines, then letters from lawyers. Wade couldn't take the pressure and sold the land for half its actual value. And do you know who bought it? Let me guess, Brenda's husband, Doug Hargrove. He owns Shenandoah Ridge Construction, And, by the way, he sits on the County Planning Commission. I took in the information. The evening air was thick with the scent of freshly cut alfalfa and a faint hint of diesel smoke. Cicadas began their evening chorus in the dusk. Earl, did you know that when an HOA officer has a direct financial interest in buying up adjacent land and their spouse intentionally creates conditions to devalue that land, it's classified as fraud? And if those fake fines are sent through the mail, it automatically becomes a federal crime? I didn't elaborate on my past service. I simply thanked Earl, waited for him to leave, and created a new folder on my laptop desktop titled The Scheme. The pressure mounted. Returning home on Friday evening, I found two strangers in my eastern pasture driving bright orange stakes with pink ribbons into my ground. One was working with a surveyor's level, while the other recorded data on a tablet. I walked up to them at a measured pace. "Gentlemen, who sent you here?" The man with the tablet looked up. "Mrs. Hargrove indicated that the property lines require clarification. There's an overlap with HOA land." "Do you have a warrant or an order from the county land surveyor?" Silence. "Did you cross-reference the state land registry before stepping onto private property?" The operator silently began folding up the tripod. "Leave my property," I said calmly, "and leave the tablet." They left, but they left behind a copy of a boundary survey, according to which 3 acres of my best pasture allegedly overlapped with Ridgecrest Meadows land. The document bore a land surveyor's seal. The next morning, I verified his license through the state database. It had been revoked 2 years prior for falsification. The document itself was a complete forgery. I photographed every stake, scanned the paper, and neatly added the materials to my folder. A week later, Brenda sent a final warning. The outstanding fine balance had reached $2,400. In the event of non-payment within 30 days, the HOA threatened to place a lien on my property and initiate foreclosure proceedings. The fraudulent boundary survey was attached to the letter, and right here, Brenda made a fatal error. Submitting knowingly false documents to seize property or funds using the U.S. Postal Service is legally defined as mail fraud, 18 U.S. Code Section 1341. This was no longer a neighborly feud. This was a federal crime carrying actual prison time. However, the final straw that broke my patience occurred on Saturday. My son, Austin, was filling a watering trough for the calves at the edge of the property. I heard the crunch of gravel and saw the beige G-Wagon pull up right to the gate. Brenda rolled down the window. She was wearing oversized Prada sunglasses and a silk scarf. "Boy," she called out to Austin, "does your dad know that being around large livestock without a special safety permit is illegal? County Child Protective Services might take an interest in this place." Austin froze. The hose slipped from his hands, water flooding over his sneakers. He looked at her in terror, then at me. I covered the distance to the gate in seconds. Brenda met me with her trademark porcelain smile. "Just looking out for the safety of the children in our neighborhood, Garrett. Surely you understand." "Get out of here, Brenda," I said. My voice wasn't raised, but it was forged from pure steel. "Get off my road." She slowly rolled up the window and drove away. Austin ran up to me. "Dad, did I break a rule?" I knelt down and put my hands on his shoulders. "No, buddy. You did everything right. That woman is just used to everyone being afraid of her." That night, I sat at my desk until 3 in the morning. This woman was systematically bullying elderly neighbors, forging documents, attempting to steal my land, and now she had targeted my child. She was used to dealing with frightened farmers. But she didn't know that for 14 years, my job had been catching people like her and sending them behind bars. The next day, I went to work. First, I submitted an official Freedom of Information Act (FOIA) request to the county archives. 3 weeks later, a box weighing nearly 11 pounds was delivered to my door. Meeting minutes from the Planning Commission, rezoning applications, and 9 years of property transfer histories. The puzzle pieces fell into place instantly. Jurisdictional boundaries. The HOA charter from 2018 strictly limited the board's authority to precisely 200 homes in the subdivision. Neither Earl's farm, nor Connie Stokes's orchard, nor my land had ever belonged to the HOA. Every fine issued over 6 years was illegitimate. Financial trails. Brenda had illegally collected over $47,000 in fines and fees from independent farmers, which was deposited into an HOA bank account where she served as the sole signatory. Conflict of interest. Her husband, Doug Hargrove, a member of the Planning Commission, personally submitted and voted on rezoning requests for properties that his wife had previously targeted with her fines. His company, Shenandoah Ridge LLC, bought Wade Buckley's land at 40% below market value. 6 weeks later, Doug approved a 120-home development project on that land with a projected profit of $4 million. I dialed my former bureau partner, Agent Reeves. "Reeves, I've got a turnkey case of public corruption and mail fraud for you. Loudoun County." "Garrett?" he asked, surprised. "Where did you get this?" "I'm the victim on the file, but the evidence binder is prepped to bureau standards. All you'll need to do is process the warrants." I visited all the affected neighbors. Earl Payton, Connie Stokes, and even Wade Buckley signed detailed affidavits attached with every receipt and record. In tandem, I installed hidden hunting cameras with motion sensors and night vision around the entire perimeter of my property, streaming video directly to a cloud server. I knew people like Brenda and her husband didn't know how to stop. The obsession with control would win out, and they walked right into it. 5 days later, at 2 a.m, the camera captured a pickup truck bearing the Shenandoah Ridge LLC logo. 2 workers stepped out with bolt cutters, severing a section of the fence and the lock on my gate. The video footage, complete with clear views of the license plate and the perpetrators' faces, saved instantly to the server. The trap snapped shut. All that remained was to await the decisive day, the county board's public hearing regarding the forced rezoning of my land. The evening of the public hearing at the Loudoun County Board was stifling. The hearing room, smelling of old carpet and conditioned air, was packed to capacity. More than 200 people occupied folding metal chairs. Most of the audience consisted of Ridgecrest Meadows residents wearing matching "Protect Our Neighborhood" buttons printed by Brenda. Brenda sat in the front row, the center of attention, wearing a dark burgundy St. John dress and a cream Hermes scarf. Her confidence in victory was absolute. Doug Hargrove sat elevated alongside the other members of the Planning Commission, adjusting his reading glasses with the air of a man deciding destinies. I sat in the very last row in a flannel work shirt. Beside me sat Earl, Connie, and Wade in silence. On my lap rested a single, thick folder. Doug spoke first, grandly and smoothly talking from the podium about the potential environmental hazards of an agricultural facility and the safety of our children. Then Brenda stepped up to the microphone. Her voice trembled with perfectly rehearsed drama. "We have exhausted every avenue to reach an agreement with Mr. Townsend. Our children deserve a beautiful, safe neighborhood, not life next to manure piles and wild livestock. Applause erupted in the room. Brenda bestowed a modest, triumphant smile upon the crowd. The board chairman asked if anyone wished to speak for the opposition. I stood up and unhurriedly walked to the podium. My name is Garrett Townsend. I am the owner of parcel 4817 on Saddleback Road. Before you vote, I would like to present several documents to the board. I opened the folder and began displaying materials on the visual presenter beneath the projector. Document 1. The original 2018 charter for the Ridgecrest Meadows HOA. It covers exactly 200 residential lots. My farm, Earl Payton's land, and Connie Stokes's orchard were never part of it. All fines issued by Mrs. Hargrove over 6 years are illegitimate. Document 2. The boundary survey presented by Brenda Hargrove. Its registration number is fraudulent, and the surveyor lost his license 2 years ago. Document 3. Bank statements confirming the illegal collection of $47,000 from independent farmland owners into an HOA account. Document 4. 3 rezoning applications submitted by Commissioner Doug Hargrove for lands previously targeted by his wife's fines, followed by resale to his own company, Shenandoah Ridge, LLC. A deafening silence fell over the room. Brenda's smile vanished in an instant. Doug slowly removed his glasses, his face turning the color of wet chalk. And furthermore, I added, activating the projection screen, I have video footage from night cameras showing a Shenandoah Ridge LLC company truck delivering workers who cut the locks and fence on my property. At that moment, the heavy doors at the back of the room swung open. Agent Reeves entered, accompanied by 2 colleagues. Their FBI badges gleamed on their belts. Doug Hargrove, Reeves announced loudly. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of mail fraud, wire fraud, and public corruption. Brenda leaped to her feet, her handbag clattering loudly to the floor. This is madness! You have no right! He is a commissioner! But the agents were already placing handcuffs on her husband. I stepped back from the microphone and looked Brenda straight in the eye. Mrs. Hargrove, you conducted an illegal inspection on the property of an active FBI special agent. That was your final unscheduled inspection. County Sheriff Hutchins stepped out from a side aisle and gently took Brenda by the elbow. Ma'am, you'll need to come with me. A complaint for breaking and entering, destruction of private property, and extortion has already been filed. The rustle of her silk dress and the sharp, trembling click of her designer heels against the linoleum were the only sounds accompanying her exit from the hall. The very residents who had applauded her 10 minutes prior now turned away in disgust. The investigation unfolded rapidly. Doug Hargrove accepted a plea deal and received 8 years in federal prison without parole for systematic corruption. Brenda's fate was no less grim. For fraud, forgery, and property damage, she received 2 years in prison, an order to pay $47,000 in restitution, and a lifetime ban from holding any position on HOA boards in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The return of the money became a true celebration for the entire valley. Earl Payton received his $14,000 and was finally able to buy modern milking equipment. Connie Stokes planted 30 new Honeycrisp apple saplings she had always dreamed of. Wade Buckley, with the help of retained attorneys, won a civil suit, received compensation, and bought a small ranching property in a neighboring county. Using my farm as a base, we established a Farmers Legal Defense Fund to help landowners stand up against the overreach of big developers and corrupt officials. 2 months passed. A late May evening painted the sky over the valley in deep shades of gold, copper, and violet. The air was filled with the scent of fresh grass and earth warmed by the sun. Triceratops, our stubborn cow, lazily chewed her cud by the watering hole, looking as though she truly owned the entire territory. My son, Austin, climbed onto the top rail of the cedar fence, swinging his legs. His cheek was smeared with soot, and his smile was missing yet another baby tooth. "Dad," he asked softly, gazing at the sunset, "are those bad people ever coming back?" I wrapped my arm around his shoulders, feeling the warmth and absolute peace of the moment. "No, buddy, they're not coming back. Our land is under good protection."